What I am curious about is more along the lines of going out and digging through the trash and things like that. Colorado made the headlines. I was wondering, do you know of any other states that have had that problem also?
Well, there was a case in Virginia a year or two ago involving a Republican operative, and let's be clear here, this works both sides of the political spectrum, who was gathering voter registrations in an illicit fashion, basically coming up with false identifications, and it wasn't that difficult. And he was one of the few who actually was exposed, and of course he had to quit, but he was never prosecuted. And when you hear about these cases, and they do pop up periodically, and even the mainstream media can't completely ignore them, they'll just write up something short, it's very rare that you get prosecutions in these kinds of instances of any kind. Mm-hmm. And it's really the fault, I believe, of the lawmakers in the several states who have made voter fraud and election fraud such a low priority. They're, in Maryland, for instance, it's a misdemeanor. In Virginia, it's the lowest class felony. Same thing in North Carolina. You would get a heavier sentence for stealing a bale of pine needles in North Carolina than you would for voting twice. That's what we found out in this latest instance. So as long as the penalties are so light, the prosecutors really aren't going to expend much effort, and the election supervisors are loath to knock people off the rolls, even if they know there's a fraud going on, because they don't want to be accused of, quote, suppressing the vote. Mm-hmm. So it's political correctness enters into this.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how elected officials these days just don't do anything for fear of being branded something? You know, we don't talk about opposition to a president because of the color of his skin. We don't talk about immigration because we don't want to be called bigots. We don't talk about voter ID, or we don't talk about voter integrity because we don't want to be, the same thing. We don't want to be branded as something. That always seems to amaze me. Like, if you're going to run for office, what's the big deal? I mean, you should know that this stuff comes with the territory, for crying out loud. But anyway, I'm sorry.
I was going to say there was a case here in Virginia outside of Richmond where a registrar of voters flat out refused to cross-check a voter list prior to the 2013 elections. Uh-huh. And that was a pretty brazen move, but he got away with it, and nothing forced him to cross-reference the names and to clean and cleanse the voter list. So voter lists here in Virginia, and I believe in many other states, are severely bloated, not just with these duplicate voters, but with other kinds of false identifications. The system is ripe for corruption. Mm-hmm. And so what happens in most cases, and certainly here in Virginia, is if an official is forced to do something, they will put the voter in what's called an inactive status. And in most places in the real world, inactive means, inert, not working. But in legislative parlance, what it means is, well, you're just sort of in a suspended state. You can still vote. You're good to go till the 2019 in the case of Virginia if you're labeled an inactive voter today. Mm-hmm. So people are given every opportunity to work the system.
Wow. Well, we got to go to commercial. When we come back, I want to ask you about Catherine Engelbrecht, who's the president of True the Vote, the watch group, True the Vote. Her solution, she gives us 3 solutions. I wanted to get your opinion on that and whether you think it's actually something feasible, something that we can do. We have Kenric Ward from watchdog.org with us, guys. We got to go to commercial, pay a couple bills, and we'll be right back here on the Conservative Syndicate. Don't go away. You can catch all our show archives at theconservativesyndicate.net. The Conservative Syndicate, real conservative talk from real conservatives.
Prices are for base buildings only. May not be available in some areas. Attention business owners, do you want a stimulus package that really works? Before you spend thousands of dollars more than you should on your next building project, listen to this. General Steel has a stimulus package designed to help you save as much as half the cost of conventional construction on your next building. As much as half. That's right. General Steel can save you thousands of dollars with a pre-engineered steel building designed for your business or church. How about a 50 by 100 foot building for under $30,000? So don't pay thousands more than you should without calling General Steel first and save as much as half the cost and time of conventional construction. With the projected demand for steel in Japan and China, prices may be skyrocketing.
800-280-3454. 800-280-3454. 800-280-3454.
Hey folks, if you're like me, you don't place a whole lot of trust in today's media for the real truth and facts regarding the volatile world of finance and politics. When I want the real scoop on money, I go to the most trusted source I know, my good friend and colleague, Bob Cardoso. Bob is a noted financial expert with a PhD in international finance who airs his nationally known and syndicated show, Robert Cardoso Live, every Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. With Bob, you'll get the right information at the right time, firsthand, from someone who knows his business and can help you make the right decisions concerning yours. Bob airs live every Monday through Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com/Robert Cardoso Live, or you can choose any one of his archive shows at blogtalkradio.com/Robert Cardoso Live. That's blogtalkradio.com/Robert Cardoso Live. For complete and honest commentary on politics, finances, and culture, check Bob out. You'll be glad you did.
Okay, hey, we're back right here on the Conservative Syndicate. We're glad you took the time to join us tonight. Let you know that you can pick up our archives about an hour after our show. We'll be off the air here in about an hour and a half, so about an hour after that, you can go to the Conservative Syndicate and download the archive. Listen to it again. If you missed something, you want to share it with people, feel free to do that. All of our shows are out there at theconservativesyndicate.net. I've got my co-host Joe Hakos with us from Dryer Report and Kenric Ward from Watchdog.org, and we're talking about a survey that was conducted by True the Vote that Kenric reported on last week. And one of the things that I saw in here, Kenric, is Catherine Engelbrecht, I guess, who is the president of the Election Watch Group at True the Vote. And she informs us that there's over 6.9 overlapping voter registrations in 28 states that they cross-checked. Didn't include the three largest states, California, Texas, or Florida. But she talks about the idea that there's a vicious, what she refers to as a vicious cycle. And it can be fixed if citizens wake up, stand up, and refuse to settle for a broken system. This seems to be the mantra of the left these days, is that a system is broken. Everything is broken. Our healthcare system is broken. Immigration systems is broken. When in fact, what we know to be the case now is that, as you said earlier, legislators do not enforce the law. They don't want to get out there and say anything. And so the system isn't that it's broken in terms of not being, appropriate or proper. It's that it's not enforced. We're just looking at another issue where things are not enforced. And she gives us three things that they need to do to fix the system. And the first one is tie registration more closely to each state's Department of Motor Vehicles. Is she talking about the idea that maybe like the CIA and the FBI or something, that the DMVs in each state should be talking to each other?
Well, exactly. It needs transparency in the system, and the law is already on the books as far as the motor voter law is concerned, so it's not a radical concept. The fact is, DMVs do require a level of identification that registrars of voters do not. So it's actually a suggestion by Jay Delancey, who is the executive director of the Voter Integrity Project in North Carolina. He is basically an independent operator, but he and Catherine are very much in agreement on the strategy here.
Okay, now she's implying that when a person registers in a particular state at a DMV, that there should be a voter card originating there. So there would be like a second form of ID, or are we talking about just putting something on the driver's license itself that says the person's eligible to vote?
I think the proposal is let the DMV do it. I mean, no one likes the DMV or the IRS or any of these other alphabet soup agencies. But the fact is the DMVs in the states are required to get identifications and issue identifications at a level of security that is not the case at registrars' offices. So you might be able to just eliminate one layer of bureaucracy by streamlining it that way.
Yeah, I would think one of the key elements, in my opinion, for DMV registration, something that I know does not exist out here in California, I don't know what it's like in every other state, is that nobody really has to provide any source of identification to get a driver's license or an ID. You just go in and fill out the forms. They don't ask for birth certificates or anything out here. It's just like you just go in and say, hey, this is who I am, and they just take your word for it, which I think is just fundamentally major flaw. Fundamentally, I mean,
yeah, and you're speaking from California, where the future happens first. Back here in Virginia, and I think in most states, there is a higher threshold, a higher standard, and this was the whole idea after 9/11. And a lot of civil libertarian groups were up in arms about this, that driver's licenses would, in fact, be more difficult to get, because we know that the terrorists had multiple driver's licenses, and so the theory was that Congress was going to tighten all this up, streamline it. Some people said that's Big Brother, we don't want it. So I think that debate is still raging, and trying to find the right balance between civil liberties and national security. And I think that voting is really a fundamental piece of this. The votes are valuable. If we're going to have elections, they should count for something.
Yeah, and you would think, this is something that, as we were talking about earlier, legislators don't really want to deal with because of the idea that when you start talking about such a thing as verifying who a person is, now you have the immigration issue pops back up. Okay, well, what are you going to do with people that are here? I never can get my head around the idea that, people are here illegally, so let's accommodate them. This whole idea, well, they're already here, so let's accommodate them. I just can't get my head around that. I understand their motive for being here, but I just don't believe that, let's just not enforce the law. That seems to be the big issue now, because we don't want to be confrontational. We don't want to be discriminatory and all the other things. The other thing that Engelbrecht says here is the second thing that she recommends, and this would be a biggie. This would be a major biggie if it was ever, actually enforced or legislated to some degree or another, is to make it a felony to possess a voter ID card from more than one state. And, I can't even imagine why something like that was never integrated in the first place. Can you have a driver's license in more than one state? I'm not even aware of that.
Apparently people do, and they can. Out here on the East Coast, there's a lot of cross-pollination north and south, the whole snowbird phenomenon that we have. And so I wouldn't be surprised if people can do it. But I will tell you, it's a lot harder to have multiple driver's licenses than it is to be a multiple voter.
Yeah. Well, I know that there are people, and I've done it in the past. When I was in the military, you live in one state and you register your vehicle in another. But the driver's license, I remember I was stationed in Pennsylvania, and I remember wanting to get a Pennsylvania driver's license, and they wouldn't do it. Now, this is 30 years ago when people followed the law. But the idea, well, you already have a California's driver's license. You don't need one here. But what you do need to do is, review the laws here. Like in Pennsylvania, it was illegal to turn on a red light. Out here in California, it's not. So, things like that. I learned that lesson real fast. The first time I got pulled over for it, which was about 2 days after I arrived there. But this whole idea of making it a felony, again, would open up that Pandora's boxes. We don't want people to actually be accountable for breaking the law for fear of being branded as something other than just some kind of passive, compassionate acceptor of whatever is evil out here or wrong. the other thing, I don't know, that didn't come out right. Boy, that sounded stupid. Okay. The other thing she talks about here is, and this is the one I think would be probably the equivalent to voter ID, would be that the person